How do the blue blood standings look going into 2024? Any changes? We'll discuss coming up next on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Go subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. This is Jay Smith. You can follow him on Twitter at Unfair Sports. And the topic of the day, the blue blood rankings that a lot of people come up with. Kyle Umlong of Texas Longhorns fandom and others try to evaluate which schools are blue bloods, which are not blue bloods, who could ascend into blue blood status. Jay, to me, this is one of those discussions where if you are at all considering Oklahoma to not be a blue blood, let's just throw that opinion out the window and take it out and take it like the New York City mayor and grab that bag of trash and stick it in the dumpster. There you go. But it is an interesting conversation in that, okay, does this list evolve? How do you feel about what the argument is for maybe some of the newer teams or newer blue bloods or contending blue bloods out there?
Yeah, to me, that like the definition of a blue blood is, I mean, isn't it like rich in tradition and years upon years upon years of some sort of success or just known for being a top dog? I feel like that is the criteria that you should always stick to, even though some blue bloods do end up kind of irrelevant over time and they fail to maintain their relevance. But I think that that's the ebbs and flow of blue bloodness, is that sometimes it's ones that haven't done anything in so many years, 20, 30 years, but they still qualify as it because they have the rich history from even the modern era of it, you know, back to the old times, to modern, to like today's time, this century's time. And so the criteria is constantly being changed because we do have some teams out there that have had those moments, those glimmers of looking like they're going to be able to start small dynasties or be at the top on a regular basis. And then they fizzle off just like they always do. So to me, it really is about maintaining those that have the standard tradition. Like, you know, we talked about this, you know, via text, the Andy Staples one, right? That's been the one that's been floating around and everybody's really ticked off at Andy for this list. And I kind of understand why people are. And I kind of understand where Andy was coming from this. If I feel like he's trying to bridge the gap between who's a blue blood and, as he has on there, who's a contender. But to me, you got to have the rich history first. If you ain't got the rich history, why are you even being considered? Period.
Yeah, so if we look at Andy Staples' list of blue bloods, it includes Alabama, of course, Ohio State, of course, Oklahoma, of course, Michigan, of course, Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas, USC, and Penn State. Now, this is where it gets a little bit spicy. And listen, I don't want to sit here and bag on USC because a decade and a half ago, under 2 decades ago, they were one of the top programs in college football during the Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, Lendell White, Pete Carroll era of USC football, but it significantly fell off in the last decade, and it hasn't found its way back yet. You look at a team like Penn State, and I'm like, okay, they've been pretty good. They've got a rich history, but is that a team that is a blue blood? To me, the blue blood discussion is very much similar to how I feel about Hall of Fame discussions. If I don't come to a discussion about a player and automatically think he's a Hall of Famer, to me, he's not a Hall of Famer. If you have to convince me that he's a Hall of Famer, he's not a Hall of Famer. And I feel like the same could be said with blue blood college football programs. If you have to make an argument to try to convince me that somebody is a blue blood, then they're probably not a blue blood. What was surprising is leaving Nebraska off this list. I mean, Nebraska, as much as Oklahoma was for the first like 60, 70, 100 years of college football, was one of the top programs in college football. I mean, you can't tell the story of Barry Switzer's Oklahoma teams without talking about Tom Osborne's Nebraska teams. You can't think about the 90s without thinking about Eric Crouch and the Nebraska Cornhuskers and how great they were during that run. Did things kind of drop off in the 2000s a little bit? They sure did. Were they at their height with Bo Pelini this century? Probably so. But that doesn't erase everything that they accomplished up until that point.
Yeah, when I look at this, of course, Nebraska here, 917 wins in history of the program, right? With the majority of them, of course, coming all the way up into like 2000. Actually, probably 2002 was probably when you start to see the slow decline of Nebraska, 2002, 2003 area. Because I recall Oklahoma, we played against them and they were ranked in the top 10, each of those years. But yeah, that's one team you can't leave off the list. Yes, they've been irrelevant since they moved to the Big Ten, which is probably what killed them because they didn't have the players that they could, bring into the program. Enough players, at least in the area or even in Big Ten country, that would be willing to travel that far to go to school there. They had Texas kids and JUCO kids definitely willing to go to Nebraska. And, throughout the 80s and 90s, that's how they lived. They were able to keep building these national championship contending teams is because they knew where to search for the players, right? Get specific types of players that would help lead them up. But to me, that's one program that should have been up there. Now, I understand the USC argument. They're at 875 wins, and then you add Penn State, which is at 930. They're both programs with a lot of wins, but the big issue you run into with Penn State is not very many national championships or conference championships. USC, I feel like USC is more of in the Texas line conversation of being a blue blood. They probably should be considered a blue blood just because they're high enough up in the number of wins in their career and they have enough NFL draft picks, Heisman Trophy winners, Hall of Famers, etc., so on and so forth. So I would make the argument for them, but that, like you said, you made a great point here. If I got to make the argument for them, probably a tough argument to make for them to be a blue blood. It should be a natural thing, right? Like I look at Michigan, blue blood, Alabama, blue blood, Ohio State, blue blood. I forgot who I was talking to, and they kind of made mention like with Ohio State, they've only had one, like maybe they had one downtime ever, like in the entire existence of the program, whereas Oklahoma, we've had like maybe two our entire time of existence, which one included, sanctions or whatnot. But yeah, Notre Dame, they're up there, even though they literally have been quote unquote irrelevant for like 50 years, it feels like. But they also still maintain 9 and 10 win seasons on a consistent basis. So they still have quote unquote winning relevance, but they're not really playing for titles except for the Manti Te'o year. And we're still trying to find that girlfriend of his. But Georgia, I wonder if Georgia's even one to even consider in this, right? I don't think Georgia's a bad choice. They've got 881 wins, so you probably have to consider them too. But yeah, the fact that if there's a switch that I'm taking probably Penn State off of this list and I'm moving Nebraska in their place. The contenders, I don't have an issue with any of these contenders except for one. Why is Oregon on here? Right? Oregon has been relevant the last
20 years, maybe 15 years,
maybe this century, right? Yeah. Like if you're just now, graduating high school or college, sure, I totally understand you thinking about Oregon. All those jerseys got your attention. That's what they're there for. But they are not in the top. What's this? They're number 50 in wins at 705 career. That is way too
not
low.
A blue blood
To ever be considered in contention for blue blood status. They need 20 more years of winning a lot for them to actually be able to move up there. They're the one that I'm just like, no, they're not even a contender here. And LSU is probably the other one that kind of made me shake my head. And I say that because when I look at LSU here, they're 17th with 806 wins. Not bad. Probably should be top 15 conversation if you want to talk about wins. While at the same time, LSU has had a very interesting 24-year run, winning 3 national championships with 3 different coaches. John, this is the thing that's weird about it. We only consider one of them a good coach. The other 2, we all had questions about. Are they even worth anything?
Right.
That's a fascinating piece to LSU. And I'm kind of curious, what do you think about LSU in this as far as a contender? How do they even fit to you? Can they fit as a contender in time?
I mean, I think LSU, I could consider them a contender for blue blood status. There's tradition. There is national championships. There is winning in that program. There's a number of, All-Americans and NFL draft picks around the league, not just, in the 21st century, but, dating back some time as well. It's a fascinating program. I wouldn't necessarily put them in blue blood status, but I think you put them in a contender spot, just kind of on that fringe. I think they're one of the better, top 20 programs of all time. Going back to the USC argument, you can't tell the story of college football without USC. Just the success through the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the aughts. I mean, even before then, OJ Simpson, USC Trojan. A lot of that stuff matters.
Allen.
Yeah, Marcus Allen. I mean, a lot of that stuff matters. Oregon, Joey Harrington, probably the earliest I can think of as far as a star player that went on to have some NFL success.
That is true. Early 2000s. Yeah, that was that was when Oregon and Oregon State was actually good. Chad Ochocinco, whatever his name is now.
Yeah.
That was when Oregon was jumping on the map Oregon State was jumping on the map at the same time. So yeah, that's a very good point.
But that's still this century. And that's still in kind of the modern college football era. You can't go back much further than that. So I'm with you. Take Penn State and let's just take them off the list, especially considering the drama that went on there with Joe Pa and the assistant that I can't even remember. And I don't even want to say his name. Sandusky. Thank you. I don't think you deserve blue blood status based on the history of your program and what all went down there. Put Nebraska on there, 100% deserves to be. We're going to talk about what Paul Finebaum had to say about Oklahoma and where they're at right now as a program heading into the SEC coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. I love sports. I love them so much. I've been watching sports for as long as I can remember. I remember moving out to California and getting Monday Night Football on Pacific time at 6:30 p.m. It was chef's kiss. My dad loved it, being an East Coast guy, getting to watch them and then still have a night ahead of him. He can get a full night's sleep and not have to worry about being tired. But hey, the playoffs are over. We're done with the playoffs. We got WNBA happening, and Major League Baseball, but that's about it right now. The sports aren't sporting like I want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So we're going to talk about what Paul Finebaum had to say most recently about the Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma, is going to the SEC. Not breaking any news here. You've been hearing about it for 3 years. We're all excited about it. Been on a couple different radio shows, one in South Carolina, one in Alabama this week, talking about Oklahoma going to the SEC, and can't say enough about the matchups and all that. And we're going to get into that coming up, looking at the K-Ford rankings for most watchable schedules and games this season. But I really thought this was very fascinating from Athlon Sports. Grant Bricker, he had this, Paul Finebaum had this to say via Athlon Sports about Oklahoma. They took a bump and a hit after Lincoln Riley left. They had to reprogram the entire place, reboot it. From a vibe standpoint, I think this year, if they can land somewhere between 8-4 and 9-3, they'll be okay considering their schedule. But I don't have any doubt Oklahoma is clearly on the way back. Jay, your thoughts?
Finebaum knows ball, right? And I think it's funny. We joke about that. He's been here actually a couple of times, and he was here during our celebration on July 1st of joining the SEC. I'm telling y'all, I said this on the episode right afterwards. Go check it out. That there's a reason why the SEC picked Oklahoma as the place to be on day one. Like, our competitors was the day before. We were day one. And then after that, Finebaum went on vacation and you didn't even see him for the rest of the week. So I think there's a particular reason for that. It's because there's an understanding of what Oklahoma brings to the table as an SEC program, right? And he says that we're on the way back, which Andy Staple, he was on the Oklahoma Breakdown last week with Teddy and Gabe. And he said this, I love this quote that he said. He basically was saying that Oklahoma, no matter what conference they've been in, they found a way to get to the top. They may not be at the top at the beginning of it, but they find a way to get there. Going back, to the old, Big 8 era, to Big 12, to the revamp of all of that. Oklahoma has always found a way to the top, even in the olden years, right? So to me, as not only as an Oklahoma fan and a homer for the most part, I get that historically we always find a way to get to the top. It may take a year, maybe two, but we always figure it out, especially through coaches. We don't go through very many coaches. The 90s was probably the time we went through the most. We went through, 4 coaches in the 1990s? But for the most part, Oklahoma is infamous for being really good at hiring coaches, kind of like the Pittsburgh Steelers in the NFL. They've gone through, 4 coaches in the last 60 years? And so that tells you something about how well the organization is run and how they let things play out like they're supposed to. And I think Oklahoma is one of those programs that does that. Joe Castiglione has been fantastic in his hirings in just about every sport. Every sport's had its moment of getting too close to glory, even though not everybody's been able to get to the top. But no, Finebaum sees and knows, no, Oklahoma's, the way this program is being put together, the way things are going, they're going to get there. It's just it's going to be a matter of time. And as long as fans are as patient as someone like a Finebaum or those on the outside that's looking in and understand ball, we're going to get to that point.
Well, and I think you look at the blue chip ratio, you look at what they're doing on the recruiting trail. They're recruiting better than anybody except for Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Texas on average over the last 3 years. I know we've kind of beat that horse dead on several shows over the last couple of weeks, but it matters. The blue chip ratio, it matters. What they're doing on the recruiting trail, it matters. They're building the depth chart in such a way that they're going to have sustained success. The evaluations are going to matter, but you've rebuilt your defensive line. You're rebuilding your offensive line. The defensive depth chart is probably the best it's been in more than a decade. And that's how you're going to win football games long-term. When your quarterback situation maybe didn't turn out like you want it to. We saw that back in the 2013, 2014 years when, there was so much quarterback uncertainty and you didn't get exactly what you were hoping for. And so having a defense that has sustained success is going to matter, and it's going to be big time for the Oklahoma Sooners. So, hey, if Paul Finebaum sees this is a team that is heading in the right direction, despite what they're going into in the SEC, man, and we believe it too. Like we're optimistic about where Oklahoma's headed, but to hear somebody who's been covering SEC football for years and years and years and years talk about the good place that Oklahoma's in, I think that's the encouraging sign here.
Yeah, it reminds you that, that other people do recognize what can and what can't happen, right? And that's the one thing Finebaum mentioned before on a couple of shows and other conversations around it, is that Oklahoma needs to get back to having the defense they had in the early 2000s. Well, luckily we have the guy that was the architect of all of that, with Bob Stoops, with Brent Venables. He did this. He did that at Clemson. He was able to beat SEC teams for national championships, right? He was a part of that system, right? And so as long as they can keep that going, right? As long as he can build his defense to be something similar to what the SEC produces on the defensive side of the ball, we'll be fine, right? And Finebaum recognized that part. But I guess the question I ask in regards to that with you, John, is how long do you think it would take for Oklahoma to stabilize themselves as the traditional Oklahoma of the Big 8, Big 12, Big 16 team era, right? How long do you think it would take? Do you say 2 years, 3 years, to where you see consistent top 3 finishes every year? Right. Because the hard part is finding that quarterback, like you mentioned. That's the toughest part about any of it. But we've seen in years past that SEC teams have just been dominant on defense with meh offense and been successful. Can Brent Venables do that? Can he leverage that formula?
I mean, I think it's possible. When we saw him do it at Clemson, and we've seen what Clemson has become since Brent Venables left, kind of a not as consistent team. But I think with what they're doing along the defensive line, the way that they're recruiting there, the way they're recruiting linebacker and defensive back, I mean, they have the makings of a defense that can be really, really good year after year after year after year. And if they're able to do that, they're able to have a top 10 defense nationally in scoring defense and yards per game allowed. Then, yeah, I think, here in a couple of years, I think we're kind of there. David Stone, Jaden Jackson, if not in 2024, I think they'll make a significant impact in 2025 and no later than 2026. And so if they continue to build that depth at defensive tackle, I think it'll really set them up really, really well to just kind of begin to have that success again and begin to put themselves in that top elite category. But especially if David Stone and Jaden Jackson really break out, I think that creates that snowball effect of elite defensive tackle play down the road. So it'll be fascinating to see because they've got the makings of it and they've got a really, really good quarterback to be able to do it. But as we've been talking about all off season, doesn't matter if you've been watching us, watching Jay, watching Sooner Scoop or OU Insider, it's going to come down to the offensive line really for this season. But everything else is set up for Oklahoma to be one of the better teams in college football this year. And that's why most people are going to be tuning into a lot of their games, not just because of who Oklahoma is facing, but because of Oklahoma as well. We're going to discuss K Ford's watchable ratings coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. So we know Oklahoma's got a tough schedule, one of the tougher schedules in the nation, definitely one of the tougher in the SEC, but that's also what makes it kind of fun. Now, if you are just hoping they get a bunch of wins and you're not just enjoying college football to enjoy college football, then okay, maybe you're not going to enjoy this season as much. But for people who just enjoy college football, this one has the makings to be one of the great seasons of all time, just simply based on what Oklahoma is going to be facing on the schedule, what the Big Ten is going to look like, what the SEC is going to look like, this new look Big 12. It's fascinating. College football is in for a really fascinating year. But Kelly Ford, who does a lot of analytics work, has his own rating system, his own metrics that he comes up with. He released the top 40 most watchable games in 2024. And your Oklahoma Sooners landed on this list 6 times in the top 40, more than anybody else in the nation. Number 5, OU Texas, coming in with a 9.9 rating. Also in the top 10, number 8, Alabama at Oklahoma. That one is going to be must-see television. At number 13, you have OU at Ole Miss. At number 15, OU at LSU. Kind of surprised that one's not in the top 10, given the potential playoff implications, the probable night game in Baton Rouge. And then you also get number 27, OU at Auburn. And then there was one, and number 18, I missed it, glanced over it because it's Mizzou. Going to gloss over that one regularly because OU at Mizzou coming in at number 18. But this one, man, it has the makings of such a fantastic season of just enjoyable football. And I think that's evident there with 6 games for the Oklahoma Sooners showing up in the top 40.
Yeah, see, and it's funny because there's so many of this. Actually, 7. Got Auburn over there at 27 with Oklahoma traveling to Auburn, which is the 7th game on the list, which is funny. So you've got OU Texas, OU Alabama, OU LSU, OU Tennessee, OU Missouri, OU Auburn, and there was one more, OU Ole Miss. So having 7 games on this list. It's right. So you see what I'm saying? Like, there's so many in there that if there's anything I would say to Sooner fans, enjoy this season. I get wanting to win it all, go undefeated, be the best team in the country, kick everybody's butt. Enjoy this season. This is going to be a historically fun season just because of who all we get to be matched up with all the top teams in the conference. And we go out there and we beat a lot of them, maybe lose 2 of them out of all of it. We've solidified ourselves as a threat in the conference because the good thing for us is, even though we did bring back a huge amount of snaps on the defensive side of the ball, we're probably only losing 3 or maybe 4 dudes off that roster. Well, probably 5 guys off that roster going into 2025. So it's a lot of returning talent on the defensive side of the ball. Same thing with the offensive side of the ball. You got a lot of returning talent and young talent ready to be elevated. The offensive line is younger. It's going to be more veteran going into next year. And so this is going to be a fun one. So seeing all of the OU games based upon Kelly Ford's ratings as well as his spreads, I mean, we knew OU Texas is going to be huge, especially after beating the best Texas team that they've had since 05, 06, right? Beating the best version of themselves, last year when they went to the playoffs. There's going to be a lot of bad blood in that game. That's going to be fun. Alabama finally coming to town. Unfortunately, we did want it to be Nick Saban, but hey, we'll take Kellen DeBoer because Kellen DeBoer is a really good coach. He's showing it on the recruiting trail right now.
Yep.
And then, of course, the Lane Train, Brian Kelly, Hypo making his return home, everybody's pretend rivalry with Missouri, and then traveling to Auburn and seeing Hugh Freeze, the former ex-SEC coach, right? We've got a lot of just fun games on the docket that, we got to cherish and enjoy it, because even though we'll see them again next season, a lot of those teams ain't going to be as good as they were this competition. Heck, they ain't going to be as good as they were last season. This season is when you're going to start seeing some of these teams kind of go back to either reality and bounce themselves out, or they may maintain a high trajectory. But I don't even know which one of these teams it could be, just because historically, most of them don't have the pedigree of your Bamas, of your Georgias, where even Oklahoma staying at the top consistently. We've got to see if anybody else can stabilize themselves to get to that point, but enjoy this year. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun season. It's going to be a very stressful season, though. So make sure you're getting your exercise in now, get that blood pressure lowered now, work on that resting heart rate right now, because your Apple Watch or Fitbit, it's going to be going crazy for these afternoon kicks and late night kicks that Oklahoma is going to be playing later this season. Maybe minimize the caffeine usage that day so you're not giving yourself a stimulant as well. So I don't know. That's probably what I'll have to do, because sports in my 40s, man, it's not good for the health all the time. It's better than exercise, though. I'll say that much. Unless I'm pounding some wings, we'll see. But man, I can't wait, dude. You talked about teams that may not be as good as a lot of people are projecting them. I could see that happening to Texas. I could see that happening to an LSU team. I think Auburn is a sneaky better than most people think they're going to be team. Although a lot's going to ride on how well Peyton Thorne develops. I don't think that you can bank on that. I think Tennessee has a chance to be a top 10 team by the time it's all said and done. But I think Oklahoma does too. So this is going to be fun in a lot of respects, that Oklahoma gets to go out and prove to everyone that they are one of the better teams, one of the better programs in the SEC, even if it is year one in the SEC. And any final thoughts on that, Jay, or anything else that we talked about on today's show?
Yeah, real quick. I think if I look at the teams that we're playing against, there's probably 3 teams on here that I feel like will probably live up to expectations or be close to it. I kind of have a feeling that Ole Miss probably will, just because of how many players they have and how many they have returning. The question always is, just because you look good on paper doesn't mean you're going to look good on the field. We've got to see if the field version matches the paperwork. I do think that Tennessee needs to get their defense game up, but I think that they're going to be a threat long term. I think Josh Heupel has done a very good job of recruiting. He's just going to have to make sure that he has a defense to go with that elite offense that he's going to be producing. He does a really good job with that. Hugh Freeze can recruit. We know Auburn's eventually going to get there. Kellen DeBoer has been fantastic at coaching other people's players. So I anticipate there be no drop-off for Alabama. There's the question marks with Texas as far as many people as they've rotated in. We don't know what those players are going to look like. We still have those. But, of course, for us, our bigger thing is, like Missouri, I don't think Missouri is going to be what everybody think there is, right? I think that their schedule is favorable. They have no excuse not to win 9 to 10 games. But I have a feeling that that's going to be something that just goes back to its normal, right? Their offense is going to be really good, but when you start changing a whole bunch of staffers on defense, you lose them to guys just south of you in conference. got questions, right? And I think LSU is going to get to that point. It's going to probably take them a year to really get the dudes that they need to make that happen. Even though LSU is recruited well, I give them another year. They're going to be a threat. But I think the thing that keeps me bullish, and we talked about this when we went through the Phil Steele's rankings for us last show. When you have a defensive coach that brings back a whole bunch of players to play in their system, and traditionally they've shown that exact improvement that you're used to, yeah, I don't think that that's going to be a problem for Venables. That's why I'd be so bullish, even with changing OCs and DCs. The defensive side portion of it, Allie is Venables, Venables is Allie. I feel like they're the same dude. I expect that defense to hum so well, just because it's not going to be a difference in terminology. It's going to be just execution. And having a younger guy that can probably help them execute a little bit better and really relate more. Yeah, that's why I'm so bullish. And I'm going to maintain my bullishness is because I really do think the defense is going to carry us next season.
Yeah, and it's going to be really, really good. And for that reason, Jackson Arnold is not going to have to go be a Heisman winning trophy quarterback, because the defense is going to be so good. I think it's going to be a top 10 defense when it's all said and done in points per game. I think they're going to be that good. They're going to be that stingy. The turnovers are going to come. Man, I cannot. Football needs to get here. We got SEC Media Days. Jay's going to be down there just scoping things out, getting the lay of the land, getting to know people, getting to introduce Locked On Sooners to the SEC world as well. And so we'll get his takeaways throughout the week down at SEC Media Days, and we'll react to everything that happens and what Venables says and what other SEC coaches say. So make sure you're staying tuned to Locked On Sooners. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Jay on Twitter at Unfair Sports, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners on all the socials, so you can go find us wherever you like the social media do things. But until next time, he's Jay. I'm John. Boomer
Sooner.